Coalition Command wrote off Acheron Station as a lost cause. A pirate armada was 6 hours out, the escape shuttles were sabotaged, and the hull was already failing. But the invaders forgot one variable. A human engineer was on board, and humans simply do not know how to die quietly. In the next few minutes, you're going to watch a burned-out mechanical engineer named Isaac Fletcher refuse to let his station roll over and die. You'll watch him turn 3 civilian mining lasers into point defense cannons, rig the station's own oxygen exhaust into a hydrogen bomb trap, hunt down the alien saboteur who sold the station out, and when a pirate dreadnought charges a planet-cracking siege cannon, rip an entire fusion reactor out of its housing and fire it down the station's fuel launch tube like a bullet. By the end, a rusting refueling depot with no weapons will have wiped out an entire pirate fleet. This is Acheron Station. Coalition Command had declared Acheron Station a lost cause. A pirate armada was 6 hours away. The evacuation shuttles were sabotaged, and the hull was already failing. The invaders had forgotten one critical variable, however. A human engineer was on board, and humans simply do not know how to die quietly. Acheron Station was never meant to be a fortress. It was a glorified truck stop, a deep space refueling depot suspended precariously above the swirling methane-rich atmosphere of a gas giant known only as Sector 4 Prime. It was a rusting bucket of bolts held together by sheer luck and the fading hopes of its multi-species crew. And on standard galactic date 409, it was officially declared dead. Isaac Fletcher wiped a streak of synthetic grease from his forehead, his graying hair matted with sweat. Isaac wasn't a soldier. He was a mechanical engineer, a former structural consultant who had spent years designing orbital defense platforms for Lockheed Martin back on Earth before taking a high-paying, low-stress civilian contract with the Coalition. He'd come to Acheron for a simple 6-month gig: upgrade the life support scrubbers, fix the atmospheric regulators, collect a paycheck. He was elbow-deep in a primary ventilation shaft when the station-wide alarm began to scream. It wasn't the standard rhythmic pulse of a meteor shower warning, nor the high-pitched trill of a localized fire. This was the long, mournful, bone-rattling wail of a code red: imminent hostile contact. Isaac slid out of the maintenance hatch, wiping his hands on his coveralls, and jogged down the dimly lit, flickering corridors toward the command center. When he arrived, the atmosphere was suffocatingly thick with despair. Commander Wyatt, an avian-descended alien whose feathers were ruffled in a display of extreme distress, stood over the central hollow table. Wyatt was a career bureaucrat assigned to this backwater post as punishment, not for any tactical brilliance. Beside him stood Security Chief Logan, a hulking reptilian enforcer whose scales were flushed the pale gray of absolute terror. "Status?" Isaac demanded, his voice cutting through the panicked chatter of the bridge crew. Wyatt didn't even look up. He just pointed a trembling, taloned finger at the holographic projection in the center of the room. "The Blood Iron Fleet," Wyatt whispered, his translator matrix rendering his native clicks into a distinctly grim, Western-accented drawl. "They just dropped out of hyperspace on the edge of the system. 3 destroyers, 1 dreadnought, dozens of boarding craft." Isaac squinted at the tactical readout. "Pirates, what do they want with a refueling depot?" "They don't want the fuel," Logan growled, his deep voice vibrating in his broad chest. "They want the raw tritium stored in our lower vaults, and they don't leave witnesses. We have 6 hours before they reach weapons range." "Then we evacuate," Isaac said reasonably. "Fire up the escape shuttles. We make the jump to the nearest Coalition outpost before they intercept." Officer Higgins, a lanky amphibious technician who had always rubbed Isaac the wrong way, shook his head. "We can't. The launch bays are sealed. Someone fried the primary launch couplings 30 minutes ago. The shuttles are fused to the docking clamps. We're trapped." A heavy silence fell over the command center. The realization settled over the crew like a physical weight. The comms array was down. The escape ships were dead. The station's meager defensive shields were barely enough to deflect microasteroids, let alone military-grade plasma artillery. "So what's the plan?" Isaac asked, crossing his arms. Wyatt slumped into his command chair, resting his head in his hands. "We initiate the scuttling protocol. We vent the atmosphere to ensure a quick, painless end before they board us. It's the only merciful option left." Isaac stared at the alien commander, then at the rest of the crew. They were all nodding. They were actually accepting it. They were just going to sit down and die. "What if?" Amelir hot spark ignited in Isaac's chest. The same stubborn fury that had once driven him to redesign an entire Boeing propulsion system overnight, because a manager told him it was impossible. "You're joking, right?" Isaac scoffed. "Mr. Fletcher, please," Wyatt said softly. "You're human. You're new to the Outer Rim. You don't understand what the Blood Iron Fleet does to captives. Death by vacuum is a blessing." "I understand math, Commander," Isaac snapped, stepping up to the hollow table and sweeping Wyatt's grim tactical display aside, replacing it with the station's architectural schematics. "I understand that we're sitting inside 3 million tons of refined durasteel titanium and hyperdense polyalloy. I understand that we have 4 Class 5 fusion reactors powering this truck stop. And I understand that I am absolutely not dying today." "The station has no weapons," Logan argued, slamming his heavy fist on the console. "We have 3 civilian-grade mining lasers and a hull that breaches if someone sneezes too hard. We cannot fight them." "We don't have military weapons," Isaac corrected, a dangerous grin spreading across his grease-stained face. "But I spent a decade engineering weapons systems for Raytheon and Lockheed. Let me tell you a secret about human engineering, Logan. There's no such thing as civilian equipment. Everything is a weapon if you push it past its safety limits." Isaac slammed his hand onto the console, isolating the station's lower industrial sectors on the hologram. "We have 6 hours. Logan, I need every security guard you have. Wyatt, give me full override codes to the mainframe. Higgins, get down to engineering and start bypassing the thermal regulators on reactors 3 and 4. Higgins blinked his wide amphibious eyes. "Bypass the regulators, but the ISO safety protocols." "Screw the protocols," Isaac roared. "By dawn, this station is either going to be a fortress or it's going to be a radioactive sun. Now move." The next 5 hours were a blur of sparks, shouting, and the smell of ozone. Isaac Fletcher became a man possessed. He stripped off his heavy jacket, leaving him in a grease-stained undershirt as he dashed from sector to sector, barking orders and tearing Acheron Station apart from the inside out. He started in the mining bay. The station had 3 heavy-duty plasma cutters, massive, slow-moving industrial lasers meant to carve ice and rock off passing asteroids, mounted on sluggish hydraulic armatures. "They take 30 seconds to pivot and lock on," Logan pointed out, watching skeptically as Isaac ripped the control panel off the primary laser with a crowbar. "A pirate fighter will dodge it easily." "Not if we remove the safety dampeners and tie the targeting matrix into the station's collision avoidance radar," Isaac muttered, fingers flying across a bundle of fiber-optic cables. He was splicing military-grade targeting logic, memorized years ago, into the crude civilian software. "You're overpowering the servos," Logan warned. "If they pivot that fast, the hydraulic lines will burst." "Then we reinforce them," Isaac shouted over the din of the machinery. "Get me the high-pressure suspension coils from the landing gear in Bay 4, same Caterpillar hydraulic tech they use back on Earth for heavy earth movers. It can take the strain. We're turning these rock melters into point defense cannons." While Logan's men reinforced the lasers, Isaac sprinted to the atmospheric processing plant. The station generated oxygen by separating volatile chemicals out of the gas giant's upper atmosphere. The byproducts, highly explosive hydrogen and toxic fluorocarbons, were carefully vented back into space through calibrated exhaust ports. Isaac found Higgins standing nervously by the main control terminal. "Higgins, have you disabled the venting sequences?" Higgins stammered, holding a data pad like a shield. I started, Fletcher, but the system's locked. If we stop venting, pressure in the holding tanks will exceed structural limits. They'll detonate." "That's exactly the point," Isaac growled, shoving Higgins aside and typing furiously. He initiated a sequence that made the alien technicians gasp. Instead of safely expelling the explosive gases outward into the void, he was rerouting them into the outer airlocks and the primary docking rings. "Fletcher, what are you doing?" Wyatt's voice crackled over the intercom. "I'm building a moat," Isaac replied grimly. "When they breach the airlocks, they won't find a pressurized hallway. They'll find a compressed cloud of hydrogen and liquid oxygen. One spark from a cutting torch, and the docking ring becomes a directional claymore. Same principle as reactive armor on a tank." "You're destroying the station to save it?" Wyatt asked, horrified. "I'm sacrificing the porch to save the house, Commander. Now let me work." But as Isaac worked, something nagged at him. The speed at which the station was failing didn't add up. The shuttles fused to their clamps, comms going dark right as the fleet arrived, terminals locked in the atmospheric plant. It wasn't bad luck. It was an inside job. Isaac paused, wiping his brow, and glanced at Higgins, furiously tapping at a secondary console, eyes darting toward the hangar bays. Isaac quietly pulled up the station's internal diagnostic log on his wrist comp. Someone was actively countering his commands. While Isaac pressurized the airlocks into explosive traps, someone was silently bleeding the pressure back out through the auxiliary vents. Isaac didn't say a word. He picked up a heavy hydro spanner and walked slowly across the grating, the hum of the reactors masking his footsteps. When he was right behind Higgins, he slammed the spanner down onto the alien's console, shattering the screen into a web of sparks and glass. Higgins shrieked and scrambled backward. "You're bleeding the lines, Higgins," Isaac said, voice dangerously low. "You locked the shuttles, you cut the comms. You're the reason they're coming here. You sold us out." Two security guards raised their pulse rifles, glancing uncertainly between the human engineer and the amphibious technician. "He's insane," Higgins cried, pointing a webbed finger at Isaac. "The human's suffering from space dementia. He's trying to blow up the station. Stop him." Isaac didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, grabbed Higgins by the collar, and slammed him against the bulkhead. "How much did they pay you? How much tritium did they promise you for leaving the back door open?" "You're a fool, Fletcher," Higgins spat, dropping the act, eyes narrowing. "The Blood Iron Fleet is unstoppable. I made a deal. I opened the doors and they let me live. They'll give me a ship. If you fight them, they'll skin you alive. You have 1 hour left. You can't win. Lock him in the brig." "And if the power goes out," Isaac snarled, throwing Higgins to the guards, "shoot him." Isaac turned back to the shattered console. He'd lost 20 minutes of prep time and now had to manually seal the vents. He tapped his radio. "Logan, Wyatt, the saboteurs in custody, but we have a bigger problem. Higgins transmitted our internal blueprints to the fleet before I smashed his rig. They know exactly where we're weak." "Then all hope is lost," Wyatt's voice trembled. "No," Isaac said, a cold, predatory smile creeping onto his face. "If they have our blueprints, it means they think they know what we're going to do. They expect a broken station. They expect standard protocols." Isaac opened the main breaker box for the station's artificial gravity and lighting systems. "Let's give them a proper human welcome. Shutting down all non-essential power. Going dark." Quick break, drop a comment before we keep going. If you were stuck on a dying station with nothing but civilian gear, what's the first thing you'd try to weaponize? Let us know below, then let's get back to it. Across the massive expanse of Acheron Station, the lights flickered and died. The comforting hum of life support faded into an eerie, oppressive silence. In the pitch blackness of space, the station became a ghost, waiting. Proximity alarms didn't blare. Isaac had disabled the audio warnings to maintain absolute silence. Instead, a single flashing red light on the command console pulsed like a dying heartbeat. "Visual contact," Logan hissed, peering through the reinforced plasti-steel observation window. Isaac stood beside him, clutching a remote detonator he'd hastily wired together from a busted comms link and a commercial pressure valve. Outside, the void of space was scarred by the fiery blue streaks of sublight engines. The Blood Iron Fleet had arrived. At the center of the formation was the dreadnought, a massive, jagged wedge of dark metal that looked like a floating nightmare. But it was the vanguard that approached first. 24 sleek, heavily armed boarding ships swarming toward Acheron Station like parasites looking for a host. "They're not even raising shields," Wyatt noted, his feathers flattened against his head in fear. "They think we're defenseless." "Good," Isaac whispered. "Let them get close. Logan, are the mining lasers primed?" "Primed, overridden, linked to the collision radar just like you asked," the security chief confirmed, claws hovering over the firing mechanism. "Hydraulic pressures at 300%. The lines are screaming." "Hold," Isaac commanded. The pirate boarding craft moved in tight formation, aiming straight for the primary docking rings, exactly what the blueprints Higgins provided would have suggested. They expected to latch on, burn through the airlock doors, and slaughter the crew in their sleep. 50 kilometers, 30, 10, Wyatt counted. "They're initiating docking procedures, 5 seconds to contact." "Now, Logan, light them up." Logan smashed his fist down on the firing console. On the exterior hull, the 3 massive industrial mining lasers, or originally designed to slowly melt ice at a range of 100 meters, violently snapped into position with terrifying speed. The reinforced hydraulic lines groaned but held. Instead of a slow, steady cutting beam, Isaac had bypassed the capacitors. The lasers discharged all their stored energy in staccato, blindingly bright microsecond bursts. Oosht, oosht, oosht. Beams thick as redwood trunks lashed into the void. They didn't just hit the pirate ships, they evaporated them. The unshielded boarding craft at the front of the formation were instantly turned into expanding clouds of superheated slag. "Direct hits," Logan roared, a massive, toothy grin splitting his scaly face. 6 targets destroyed. Panic rippled through the pirate formation. The remaining boarding craft scattered, breaking their approach vectors, frantically engaging their deflector shields. But they were too close. "They're swarming. They're targeting the lasers," Wyatt yelled, watching the tactical display as the surviving ships opened fire. Bolts of red plasma slammed into Acheron's hull, shaking the command center. "Let them," Isaac said coldly. "The lasers did their job, they broke the formation. Now we spring the trap." 2 pirate ships, realizing the lasers couldn't track them once they got under the station's defense perimeter, swooped low and slammed their magnetic docking clamps onto Hangar Bay C. "They've attached to the lower ring," Logan shouted. "They're cutting through the outer door." "They really should have checked the atmospheric readings," Isaac muttered, thumbing the switch on his makeshift detonator. Down in Hangar Bay C, the pirates burned through the outer seal with a thermal lance. But as the heavy blast door gave way, they weren't met with a terrified, surrendered crew. They were met with 50,000 cubic feet of highly compressed, oxygen-rich hydrogen gas, laced with fluorocarbons. The spark from the pirates' own thermal lance ignited the mixture instantly. The explosion was magnificent. In the vacuum of space it was silent, but the shockwave violently rocked the entire station. A brilliant, blinding sphere of orange fire erupted from the hangar bay, channeling through the pirate ship's own breached airlocks. The 2 boarding craft were gutted from the inside out, their hulls tearing open like cheap aluminum cans. The blast forcefully detached them from the station, sending their burning, spinning husks spiraling down into the gravity well of the gas giant below. "Hull breach in Sector C," Wyatt called out, his voice laced with awe rather than panic. "Auto bulkheads have sealed the sector. We held the pressure. That's 2 down, 6 to go. 2 down, Isaac said, wiping sweat from his eyes. But the victory was short-lived. A massive tremor shook the command center, throwing Isaac to the floor. The emergency lights flared, bathing the room in a bloody red glow. "Report," Isaac yelled, scrambling up. "It's not the boarding craft," Logan yelled, staring at the console. "It's the dreadnought. They've realized we're fighting back. They just fired a heavy mass driver round into our lower engineering deck." Isaac's heart stopped. "Engineering, that's where reactors 3 and 4 are." "Fletcher," a frantic voice crackled over the intercom, a security guard from the brig. "The blast knocked out the localized power grid. The cell doors failed. Higgins is out, and he's locked himself in the primary coolant control room." Isaac swore violently. "He's going to shut down the coolant flow to the reactors. If they melt down, the station cracks in half." "I'm sending a security team," Logan barked. "No time," Isaac yelled, sprinting for the door. "By the time they cut through the blast doors, we'll be vaporized. Keep those lasers firing, Logan. Keep the fighters off our back. I'll handle Higgins." Isaac ran faster than he had in 10 years down the access ladders, sliding railings, ignoring the klaxons and the groaning of the station's overstressed metal skeleton. He reached the engineering deck. The air was thick with smoke, the heat already rising. Through the reinforced glass of the coolant control room, he could see Higgins, frantically typing into the master console, initiating a manual purge of the liquid nitrogen coolant. Higgins looked up, saw Isaac through the glass, and smiled. He pressed a button and the intercom crackled to life. "I told you, human, you can't win. The dreadnought will rip this station apart. I'm securing my passage." Isaac didn't bother arguing. He grabbed a heavy plasma torch from a nearby tool rack. He didn't aim at the door. He aimed at a secondary high-pressure coolant line running along the ceiling of the corridor, a massive insulated pipe feeding into the reactor's auxiliary heat sinks, directly above the control room's air circulation intake vent. "What are you doing?" Higgins yelled over the intercom, his smile faltering. "You'll flood the corridor." "I'm an engineer, Higgins," Isaac yelled back, igniting the torch. "I solve problems." He sliced into the high-pressure valve, not cutting it fully, just enough to compromise the seal, then grabbed a heavy wrench and smashed it against the weakened valve. The pipe burst. A torrent of liquid nitrogen at 300 degrees below zero erupted into the corridor. Isaac dove behind a bulkhead as the freezing cloud violently expanded. The supercooled gas was sucked straight into the control room's air intake. Inside the glass booth, Higgins barely had time to scream before the temperature plummeted to instantly lethal levels. The alien froze solid, hands still hovering over the final purge button. Isaac, shivering violently from the cold, crawled back to the door, punched in the manual override, and shattered the frozen locking mechanism with his wrench. He stepped over Higgins' rigid form, slapped the emergency abort switch, and restored the coolant flow just as the reactor core temperature alarm began to blare. The reactors stabilized. The first wave was dead. The saboteur was dealt with. But as Isaac leaned against the console, catching his breath, the station shuddered again. A deep mechanical groan resonated through the floor plates. "Fletcher," Wyatt's voice came over the comms, hollow and defeated. "Get back to the bridge. The boarding craft were a distraction. The dreadnought's moving in and it's charging its main spinal cannon." Isaac looked out a small viewport. The massive jagged wedge of the pirate flagship loomed in the darkness, dominating the stars. At its nose, a terrifying sphere of white-hot plasma was building, aimed directly at Acheron Station. They had survived the night, but dawn had arrived, and it was carrying a very big gun. Second check-in, before this gets even crazier, tell us in the comments. Do you think Isaac makes it out of this? Type your prediction now so we can hold you to it, then let's finish the fight. Isaac burst onto the command deck, boots slipping slightly on the steel grating. The bridge was lit entirely by the harsh, pulsing red glow of the tactical hollow table. The main view screen, normally reserved for tracking benign cargo freighters, was now dominated by the monolithic silhouette of the blood iron dreadnought, a beast of jagged dark metal, a kilometer long, bristling with weapon emplacements. At its prow, two massive conductive prongs channeled energy into a localized singularity. A sphere of superheated plasma was growing rapidly, glowing with terrifying, blinding intensity. "Time until that thing fires?" Isaac asked, chest heaving. Commander Wyatt sat slumped in his chair, avian features drooping in absolute defeat. 3 minutes, Mr. Fletcher. It's a siege cannon meant to crack planetary shields. When it discharges, Acheron Station won't simply explode. We'll be atomized. Security Chief Logan paced like a caged predator. "My lasers can't reach it. It's holding position just outside our maximum optical range. The pirate commander is taking his time. He knows we're helpless." "Nothing is helpless," Isaac muttered, moving to the main console and shoving debris out of the way. His fingers danced across the keys, pulling up the station's deep-level structural schematics. He wasn't looking at the weapons. He was looking at the logistics. "Wyatt," Isaac said, eyes scanning a blueprint of the lower decks. "This station was built as a deep space tritium refueling depot. How do we get the refined fuel from our holding tanks to the Coalition capital ships that dock here?" Wyatt blinked, confused by the sudden change in topic. We use the primary magnetic umbilical, a massive electromagnetic accelerator tube running the length of the station's central spine. It launches the fuel pods at high velocity, so the capital ships don't have to enter the gas giant's gravity well. "A magnetic accelerator tube," Isaac repeated, a slow, grim smile spreading across his face. "Also known in military terms as a coil gun, a mass driver." Logan stopped pacing. "Fletcher, you cannot be serious. That track is meant to launch stable fuel pods, not weapons. Even if you fired a piece of scrap metal out of it, it wouldn't dent a dreadnought's forward deflector shields." "You're right, a piece of scrap wouldn't scratch it," Isaac agreed, pulling up a new schematic. "But I'm not going to fire scrap metal. We're going to fire Reactor 4. Silence fell over the bridge. Even the groaning of the overstressed bulkheads seemed to quiet. "Reactor 4, Wyatt whispered, horrified. "The Class 5 fusion core. Fletcher, that reactor weighs 400 tons and contains a miniature sun. It's one of the things keeping our structural integrity field active." "And it was designed by paranoid human engineers," Isaac shot back. "I read the manual on the flight out here. The cores are fully modular, built with emergency ejection rails for a catastrophic meltdown. We detach it, drop it into the primary magnetic umbilical, and de-launch it." Isaac quickly drafted the sequence and threw it onto the holographic display. "Operation Archimedes Strike. Step 1. Disengage magnetic containment locks on Reactor 4. Step 2. Bleed the primary coolant, force the core into an uncontrolled thermal runaway. Step 3. Drop the destabilized core into the refueling umbilical track. Step 4. Overload the umbilical's electromagnets, firing the 400-ton core at 12,000 kilometers per second. If we time it right, the core reaches critical mass exactly as it strikes the dreadnought's deflector shields. It won't just hit them with kinetic force. It'll hit them with the concussive yield of a thermonuclear warhead." Logan's jaw dropped. "It's madness. If the core detonates while still inside the umbilical, it rips Acheron Station in half." "Then we'd better not miss," Isaac said dryly. "But we have a problem. The umbilical track is fixed, it points straight down. The dreadnought is holding position off our port bow, 30 degrees out of alignment," Wyatt noted, his panic giving way to the cold logic of Isaac's plan. "We can't re-aim the track." "We re-aim the whole station," Isaac said. "Logan, the central computer's locked out from Higgins' sabotage. Attitude thrusters won't respond to remote commands. I need you and your heaviest people down in the exterior maneuvering pods, manually override the gyroscopes and fire the attitude thrusters. You have to physically rotate this 3 million-ton station 30 degrees to port. The structural frame will scream, Logan warned, grabbing his pulse rifle. Civilian stations aren't built to yaw that fast. Then let it scream. You have 2 minutes, Chief, go. Logan didn't hesitate. He roared an order in his native tongue, and a dozen security officers sprinted out of the command center toward the lower airlocks. Isaac turned back to his console, opening a direct feed to Engineering Deck 4. On the main screen, the dreadnought's plasma weapon was no longer just glowing, it was pulsating violently. The pirates were making their final calibrations. "Wyatt, I need you on the umbilical controls," Isaac commanded. "When I say go, I need you to dump every ounce of auxiliary power this station has into the magnetic track. Turn off life support, turn off gravity, turn off the lights. Give me everything." Wyatt nodded, talons gripping the edge of the console. "May the ancestors forgive us." Deep in the bowels of the station, Logan and his team reached the manual override levers for the attitude thrusters. Massive industrial hydraulic levers built for loading mechs, not organic crew. "Heave," Logan roared over his radio. 3 reptilian guards threw their combined weight against the port side lever. Nothing happened at first. Then, with a deafening screech of stressed titanium, the manual valves cracked open. Up on the bridge, Isaac felt the deck tilt violently beneath his boots. The entire station groaned, a deep, terrifying sound of metal bending against the laws of physics. Structural integrity alarms blared a discordant symphony of imminent failure. 15 degrees, Wyatt yelled, watching the gyroscope readouts as the station lumbered into a turn. 20. The hull plating in Sector 4 is buckling. "Hold it together," Isaac whispered, watching the dreadnought slide toward the center of the targeting reticle. "Warning, enemy vessel is locking on," the station's automated voice announced, eerily calm amid the chaos. "They see us rotating," Isaac gritted out. "They know we're lining something up." On the dreadnought, the pirate commander clearly realized the dead station wasn't waiting to be executed. The plasma sphere at the ship's prow flared to maximum intensity. They were firing early. 28 degrees, Wyatt screamed. 29:30, we're aligned. "Logan, kill the thrusters," Isaac shouted, slamming his fist onto the engineering console, severing the final containment clamps on Reactor 4. Deep inside the station, the massive glowing heart of the fusion core dropped out of its housing, plummeting into the reinforced tunnel of the primary magnetic refueling umbilical. "Reactors in the chamber," Isaac yelled, fingers flying across the terminal. "Bleeding coolant, thermal runaway in 5 seconds. Inside the umbilical track, the 400-ton core began to pulse with a furious, blinding white light. Deprived of its cooling jackets, the miniature sun inside the casing expanded, pushing violently against the magnetic containment fields. "Wyatt, give me the power." Wyatt grabbed the master breaker for the station's secondary systems and ruthlessly yanked it down. Acheron Station went instantly, terrifyingly dark. Gravity vanished, sending data pads and loose tools floating into the air. Life support hummed to a halt. Every volt generated by the remaining 3 reactors was violently shunted into the umbilical track. The station vibrated so hard Isaac's teeth rattled in his skull. The electromagnets around the launch tube hummed with an earth-shattering roar. "Fire!" Isaac roared. At that exact moment, the pirate dreadnought discharged its siege cannon. A beam of superheated plasma, thick enough to swallow a skyscraper, erupted from the ship's prow, hurtling across the void toward Acheron Station. But it was met halfway. A blinding streak of pure kinetic fury shot out from the belly of the refueling depot. The overloaded fusion core accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light, crossing the 10-kilometer gap in less than a heartbeat, and collided perfectly with the incoming plasma beam. The impact didn't create a standard explosion. It created a temporary, localized star. The heat of the dreadnought's weapon instantly stripped away the reactor's remaining containment fields, detonating the unstable core midway between the two vessels. The resulting blast wave was a terrifying halo of pure energy expanding outward in absolute silence. The pirate dreadnought, caught point-blank in the detonation of a Class 5 fusion bomb, never stood a chance. Its forward deflector shields shattered like glass. The jagged dark hull simply ceased to exist, vaporized instantly by the multi-megaton flash. The shockwave tore through the ship's internal magazines, setting off a chain reaction that ripped the kilometer-long vessel into millions of glowing molten fragments. A split second later, the edge of the blast wave slammed into Acheron Station. Isaac was thrown violently backward, hitting the bulkhead as the station spun wildly out of control. The reinforced viewports of the command center instantly blackened as their polarization filters overloaded. The sound of tearing metal echoed through the hull as the station was pushed back into the upper atmosphere of the gas giant below. And then absolute silence. Isaac groaned, floating weightlessly in the dark. He tasted blood in his mouth. "Wyatt," he croaked, coughing violently. "Logan." Emergency battery lights flickered on, casting a dim yellow glow across the ruined bridge. Wyatt was strapped into his chair, dazed but alive. The intercom crackled. "Fletcher," Logan's voice heavy with static. "We're alive, we're floating, but the hull's holding. Barely." Isaac unbuckled himself, pushing off the wall to float over to the manual viewport controls. He pulled the heavy physical lever, retracting the blast shields over the main window. The void outside was unrecognizable. Where the blood iron fleet had once gathered to enact a massacre, there was now only a vast, glowing field of twisted debris, molten slag, and frozen clouds of venting atmosphere. The dreadnought was gone. The surviving fighters had either been annihilated by the shockwave or were desperately fleeing into deep space, thrusters burning wildly as they ran from the human-engineered nightmare. "By the ancestors," Wyatt whispered, unbuckling his harness and floating beside Isaac to stare out at the carnage. "You did it. You broke the armada." "We did it," Isaac corrected, wiping blood from his chin. "Commander, and let's not make a habit of it, I'm pretty sure firing a reactor violates several OSHA regulations." "Last check-in, one more before the ending. If this happened for real, what do you think Coalition Command says to Isaac when they find out he fired a fusion reactor out of a fuel tube? Drop your best line in the comments, and let's wrap this up." 3 hours later, the Coalition cavalry finally arrived. A strike force of heavy cruisers dropped out of hyperspace, weapons charged and ready to engage the infamous Blood Iron Fleet and avenge the doomed station. Instead, Captain Henderson of the Coalition vessel Vanguard stood on his immaculate bridge in absolute silence, staring at his tactical readout. Acheron Station was battered, scorched, and missing its entire lower umbilical assembly. It limped along on auxiliary power, spinning lazily above the gas giant. Surrounding it was the largest graveyard of pirate vessels Henderson had seen in his 30-year career. "Acheron Station, this is Captain Henderson of the Coalition Fleet," he broadcast, voice laced with disbelief. "We are reading massive debris fields and 0 hostile contacts. Please report your status. What the hell happened out here?" Static crackled over the comms for a moment before a tired, undeniably human voice replied. "Coalition Fleet, this is Isaac Fletcher, lead engineer of Acheron Station. Hostiles have been neutralized. The station is secure." A brief pause, followed by the sound of a hydrospanner clanking against metal. "And tell your command I'm charging double time for the night shift." Humanity's greatest strength isn't our biology. It's our absolute, stubborn refusal to accept the impossible. If you enjoyed watching a human engineer turn a rusting truck stop into a pirate's worst nightmare, hit that like button. Subscribe and ring the bell for more epic HFY sci-fi stories where Human ingenuity conquers the cosmos. Share this video with your friends and let us know in the comments. What everyday machine would you weaponize to defend a space station?